You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And this is our final episode for 2016, a year we're none of us sorry to leave, although we all, I'm sure, share some anxiety about 2017. Anyway, this is also our Solstice show. Not so much in a touchy-feely way, but in fact in the scientific reality of what the planet and the sun do at this time of the year. In the northern hemisphere, we have the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, which feels apt. But it's heartening because in the southern hemisphere, it's the summer solstice at the same time. So there's light somewhere, somehow, someplace. Anyway, we have a great show for you, a terrific guest, a surprise or two. And before we get to any of that, we're going to go inside the headlines. Let's start abroad and then bring it all back home. As reported by the Washington Post, 27% of Europeans say rape is acceptable in some circumstances. That's according to a study done on behalf of the European Commission, the executive arm of the European Union. The number is higher in Eastern and Central European nations, Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Czech Republic, and it runs as high as 50% in Romania. But although there was a clear divide between Eastern Europe, the formerly Soviet satellite nations, and Western Europe, that's not the whole story. In Belgium, 40% agreed that sexual intercourse without consent is justified in some circumstances, those being marital rape, date rape, and women, quote, provoking it, as opposed to 15% thinking that in the Netherlands. The report arrives amid concern about recent sexual assaults in European countries by refugees or immigrants, but the EU study shows that Europe's sexual assault acceptance problem is not limited to immigrants. 27%, for example, of all native Germans said that sexual intercourse without consent may be justified in some circumstances. It was found that false perceptions about gender-based violence persist, particularly the idea that violence against women is provoked by the victim or that women invent or exaggerate claims of abuse or rape. Colombia has been roiled by mass demonstrations since the kidnapping and murder of an indigenous child earlier this month. Their national newspaper El Tiempo reported that 7-year-old Juliana Andrea Samboni was playing outside her family's house in a poor neighborhood in Bogotá when a man grabbed her and pulled her into his truck. Later that night, her sexually abused, tortured, and strangled body was found in an upscale apartment, and police arrested Rafael Noguera, a 38-year-old wealthy architect, high on cocaine, charging him with the abduction and murder. Mass demonstrations followed, with women chanting, "We are all Juliana." Colombia suffers from high rates of sexual violence against women and children, with as many as 40 children raped every day. On average, one woman is killed every 2 days in the country, and Latin America overall has the highest femicide rates in the world due to, quote, a macho and aggressive culture, close quote, according to Carlos Valadez, director of the National Institute of Legal Medicine and Forensic Science. In October, Twitter, trying to balance freedom of expression and compliance with local laws, blocked users in Germany from accessing the account of a neo-Nazi group that is banned by the government. Germany has, I think, laudable laws against hate speech and against neo-Nazi groups. This was Twitter's first step in applying its new policy that it announced last January, part of its effort to be transparent, supposedly, while complying with policies and laws of different countries so it won't be shut down in those countries. Speaking of which, the state of Oregon passed a revenge porn bill in June 2015, criminalizing, quote, the unlawful dissemination of an intimate image of a person with a specific intent to humiliate or harm that person's reputation, close quote. 31-year-old Benjamin Barber was the first person to be convicted under the law after uploading explicit videos of himself and an ex-girlfriend onto multiple adult websites without her permission. Barber was sentenced on December 1st to 6 months in jail, followed by 5 years probation, but he has called the law unconstitutional and is threatening to sue the state of Oregon for violations of his First Amendment rights. His attorney claims that Barber held the rights to the videos and that the woman had no right to privacy. According to Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, 34 states and Washington, D.C. all have laws in place against revenge porn. 90% of non-consensual pornography victims are women, and over half of the victims reported that the explicit material was posted by an ex-boyfriend. 93% of victims said that they have suffered significant emotional distress as a result. So-called revenge porn, because of its relative newness, hasn't been formally yet named in the list of unprotected speech under the First Amendment. That list currently includes incitement, threats, obscenity, child pornography, defamation of private figures, criminal conspiracies, and criminal solicitation. The American Civil Liberties Union sued Arizona in 2014 to undo its revenge porn statute, and the case was settled in the ACLU's favor, with the judge ordering prosecutors not to enforce the law. Always a friend to porn. You can count on the ACLU. However, the American Bar Association and many law professors have called for the courts to add a clear exception to the First Amendment regarding banning revenge porn, given that the harm caused is so severe that an exception to ordinary free speech principles is justified. Certainly the framers did not have protecting revenge porn in mind with the First Amendment. Sexually transmitted diseases are on the rise, according to a report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Young people, members of racial minorities, and men who have sex with other men are most at risk. Over the past few years, the West has had bigger increases in STD rates than any other region, but the South still has the highest overall rates of gonorrhea and chlamydia. Chlamydia, disproportionately, of course, affects women. And this is what we get when they forced Planned Parenthood clinics to close by making it impossible for them to stay open. And now to the Women's March on Washington. Some of you have been wondering why I have been silent on the plans for this in the weeks since it was first announced. Well, there appears to have been a bit of chaos involved at first, with well-meaning but seemingly uninformed young white women plunging ahead to announce it while not factoring in any of the people, expertise, communities, history, or organizations necessary to making it representational of the women's movement. Now, however, a broadened leadership of organizers say it is inclusive, with women of color as part of the leadership, with numerous women's groups signing on, and with more of a united front message than was sent earlier. Nevertheless, the march has been denied a permit for the usual protest sites in Washington, D.C., including the Lincoln Memorial and the Mall. The Women's March does, however, now have a permit to rally at 10 a.m. on Saturday, January 21, at Independence Avenue and 3rd Street Southwest. And from there, they might march. Well, we don't know yet. They don't know where. Maybe they'll march in place. Maybe they'll just rally. I don't know. You can find regularly updating information on their site, womensmarch.com, and they're also on all the usual social media platforms. You can also find important information on parallel marches across the country, in the U.S. territories, and in fact internationally, all keyed to the same date, January 21st. That information, city by city and country by country, can be found at womensmarchonamerica.org, since now is the time for all good women and men to come to the aid of this country. We have to take a break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back directly with a return guest to this program, a woman who has been defending the original intent of the framers of our Constitution and the separation of church and state, and who's been fighting the religious right before there was a resistance, and who's leading the resistance now. Coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Fortunately, there are a number of excellent organizations in this country that fight to preserve the separation of church and state as intended and mandated by the framers of the Constitution. My favorite among them is Freedom from Religion Foundation, ffrf.org. Because of the wit of its materials, because of its principled activism, and most of all, because it makes the connection between free thinking, atheism, agnosticism, whatever, and women's rights. And it is a historical and revealing connection. Laurie Gaylor, together with her late mother, co-founded FFRF. Laurie has been on this program a number of times before. She's the author of 2 books. One, Woe to the Women, The Bible Tells Me So, and Women Without Superstition, No Gods, No Masters. I'm delighted that she rejoins us in this Solstice program. Laurie, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Well, you're a regular, and usually in our year-end show to talk about atheism and women and the moral connection, in fact, between women and feminism and free thinking or secularism or the various different names for it. So since the show has grown rather exponentially this last year with lots of new listeners who have not heard you on, or our end-of-year show, please let's start for their sake from basics and tell what Freedom from Religion Foundation is, what makes it unique, and what it does.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation is a national membership association for those of us who are personally free from religion, atheists, agnostics, skeptics of whatever pedigree, and we work very, very diligently to keep religion out of government. The First Amendment requires that the religion should also not impinge on the state, that our government should be free from religion. And so we have 7 staff attorneys. We publish and litigate, and we have our own radio show too. Mm-hmm. And we think that we're sort of holding up the Enlightenment. And we, at this time of year, are very busy with state church skirmishes all over the country, with nativity scenes in public places and so on, and trying to counter those.
Mm. Well, your lawsuits have also been extremely valuable to general progress in this country. So talk about some of those.
Yes, well, we have won actually 6 lawsuits this year. We're pretty pleased about that. And we have a new lawsuit, Barker versus Conroy, where we're challenging the very pernicious censorship of atheist invocations by the House chaplain, who happens to be a Roman Catholic priest. Mm-hmm. And Dan Barker is co-president with me. We're married, and he's a former minister who happens to have qualifications that are required to give guest invocations before Congress. But the chaplain has forbidden him to do so. So we're in federal court over that. We have recently removed 10 Commandments monuments from high schools, that kind of thing. Mm. We have about a dozen ongoing lawsuits challenging usually religion on public property, religious promotion by the government, and including preference for religion over non-religion, such as by the Internal Revenue Service, which gives churches and ministers a lot of perks that other nonprofits don't get.
Mm, yes. Well, of course, Madison said that there should be no chaplains in Congress, and Washington said there should be no chaplains in the military. I mean, so we've already come a far way from what the framers intended. And as you know, because you were such a tremendous help in the research for it, my book, Fighting Words, A Toolkit for Combating the Religious Right, my little sort of pocket book arguing tool, cites that and cites many other examples of just how profoundly free thinkers and secularists the framers were, which is why they wanted a wall between
absolutely
church and state. It was better for church and it was better for state. You know.
And the framers of our secular constitution, in fact, knew that the only wall we need is between church and state.
Yes. And
it's our little response to the election.
Oh, well, the election. Oh, Annie Laurie. Oh, Annie Laurie. I mean, almost the only. Yeah, well, certainly the only closest to anything vaguely positive I could think about this monstrosity that got into our system is that it wasn't that much of a religious campaign, because clearly he doesn't believe in anything except himself as God, that he believes. But the policies in his flirtation with the religious right are still extremely dictated by the religious right. I mean, anti-choice, well, you name it. They're all over the place. And he's a product of a party that has wielded religion like a bludgeon and overstepped what the framers intended hugely.
Well, regardless of what Donald Trump's personal views are, and I agree with you, I don't think he's really seriously religious. If I believed in a soul, I would say that he has sold his soul to the religious right. Mm-hmm. And that means that Washington, D.C. is about to be overrun by zealots. And the religious wrong, as I like to call them, will soon control all three branches of government, and they're seeking to pack the Supreme Court. Right. So it is going to require all of our best efforts and persistence to safeguard our freedoms. You know, freedom of conscience is what we deal with at FFRF. Scientific progress, civil personal liberties are all in great jeopardy. And so we are working very hard that reason should prevail. And we have a big fight ahead of us, but I think that the majority of the country do not want to see us go the way of a theocracy.
No, and they didn't vote that way either.
No.
Yeah.
No, but it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of persistence by our state church group and others working on that angle of it. I think that really abortion rights is a state church issue. Mm-hmm. It is the attempt by fanatics to inflict their faith that a zygote is got a soul. Right. That is really behind the anti-abortion movement, and our Constitution should prohibit the infliction of somebody's dogma on the rest of us. Yeah. So
also the hypocrisy of the religious right was so clearly shown up in this election, because suddenly, there were and are a few people. In fact, I had a feminist recently on the program who calls herself an evangelical and who was saying the same thing I'm saying now, that the hypocrisy and the male supremacy among her colleagues in the religious right was deafening. I mean, so does she get hate mail. But the hypocrisy in that, they decided to back a 3 times divorcee, proud womanizer, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go down the entire list of obnoxiousness of Donald Trump, which supposedly went against everything they believed, but when push came to shove and power was at stake, they basically backed him.
Well, the religious right has certainly ceded the moral high ground, the holier than thou stuff, for pragmatism to try to force their religion on us, through this, I don't know what you call him.
Well, we can refer to him as him.
Yes, but when he picks, Mike Pence, and he basically seems to be saying he'll be expected to run the new administration. Right. This is very concerning. Pence, I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. Mm-hmm. And we are so concerned about the nomination of Betsy DeVos for Secretary of Education, because she intends to the death of our public secular education.
Yeah.
She's a lobbyist for vouchers, which are primarily to have religious education paid by taxpayers.
Yeah.
And this is the fox guarding the chicken coop.
It is, and the framers would spin in their graves at that notion. They really wouldn't just dance; they'd become whirling tops.
But I think what we are most concerned about at FFRF, of course, is the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And that was what was the most bitter disappointment, because we were looking forward to getting a 5-4 swing in our favor if a Democrat was elected. And of course, President Obama's nomination, Garland, should have been heard by the Senate. That was utterly unprecedented.
Yeah.
But we thought we would maybe get a little bit of swing back on that court. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
Yeah.
And so now we're back to somebody will be appointed who will be like a Scalia.
Right.
And we can live with that, but what we're most concerned about is if some liberal justices are replaced under the Trump term, and what that will mean into the generations.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to fight that very hard.
That's scary as hell. I want to talk a bit about the deep connection between free thinking or secularism and women, and feminism in particular. You, of course, are the author of a wonderful book that we've talked about on this program before. Big, thick, incredibly useful book for researchers, just to read for fun, called Women Without Superstition.
And you should have been in it, but at the next one you will be.
Oh, don't worry about it. No Gods, No Masters, the collected writings of the women free thinkers of the 19th and 20th centuries. It is superb. People whom you never knew were free thinkers, basically the suffragists.
Yes.
And almost every other progressive woman who has had a positive effect on U.S. history is here. What emerges is a pattern of women, of course, realizing that one of the, if not the, I would say the ultimate weapon against women's emancipation, women's enfranchisement, women's equality has been religious institutions and institutionalized religion. And it's interesting because you've been saying this for years, and FFRF has been following that real history with activism. And now there's a 2015, just last year, Pew Research study found that while women on the whole remain more religious than men, there's an ever-increasing percentage of women identifying as atheist, agnostic, or, quote, none, having no religion. With
N-O-N-E.
Yeah, N-O-N-E, with one recent estimate stating the number of non-religious women in the United States tripled between 1993 and 2013. And there's another book by a guy, Lee Eric Schmidt, A New Cultural History of Atheism in America, Village Atheists. And that... in that he also traces how whatever appellation was used, secularism, free thinking, atheism, agnostic, whatever the appellation, the name, many of them, both male as well as female, understood just how religion normalized and reinforced women's oppression. But you were first on the block with this, so talk about that connection.
Well, the untold story of the feminist movement is it was started with non-believing women without superstition, as I call them.
Right.
And we owe this enormous debt to the brave women such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the first to offer women's right to vote, and an ardent agnostic who really started and sparked the women's movement. Most of the original founders of the women's movement were free from religion, and they had to be because they were speaking out in public against the strictures of the New Testament.
Right.
It took rebels to fight the Bible-based subjugation of women, and the Bible really is a handbook for women's subjugation. But Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote that the Bible was hurled at us from every side when they would go out calling for women's basic human rights.
Yeah.
And it was fighting the churches all the way to get the vote, to get, of course, marriage reform, divorce reform, and today, the right to our own body.
Yes.
And they were talking about that in the 19th century.
Oh, very much
and
so.
we're still fighting the only organized religious opposition to women's rights is religious. That doesn't mean that all of the denominations today are anti-feminist, but it didn't come from them.
Right.
They were reformed from within by women.
Right. And you recently had one of your brilliant page ads, that is Freedom from Religion Foundation, in the New York Times, about the situation we're in and facing politically in this country. But also, you've set up a whole new URL with making the connection with women. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the ad is running. We did run to celebrate the Bill of Rights Day, which is December 15th, celebrating the anniversary of the adoption of the Bill of Rights in 1791. And at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, we're trying to put the focus on the Bill of Rights instead of on Christmas rituals by our government. We think the government should be celebrating the Bill of Rights and not putting nativity scenes on public property. I mean, if they want to do something in December, this December 15th anniversary is very timely and apt. So on honor of Bill of Rights Day, we ran a full-page ad in the New York Times in honor of it. And the URL that we use for people to contact us is now ffrf.org/resist, because we do need a resistance movement. And it's about, our ad said, don't let the religious right trump the First Amendment. And we use this line that the only wall we need is between church and state. So that's the basis of that ad. And we would love to see Bill of Rights displays on public property in December on every governmental level. That would be appropriate, whereas nativity scenes are not.
Yes, of course. I mean, what is interesting to me is that, I mean, particularly about FFRF, and there are other organizations out there that are fighting the religious right. But FFRF to me is unique because from the very get-go, you, and before you, your late wonderful feminist mother, have from the beginning made the connection between feminism and free thinking, and it pervades all of the work that FFRF does. So you can see why I became a fan some time ago.
Well, my mother felt very firmly as an early abortion rights activist that we would never get women's freedom unless we got at the root cause of women's oppression, which is religion, and particularly when it's in our laws.
Yes.
That you'd be chipping away at it, we'll be making some progress, but unless we get to the root, it's going to be a problem forever. And
it's patriarchy right there at the root, bright and, in this case, noxious green color. I want to thank you again for all of the work that you do, Laurie. I mean, the book is called Women Without Superstition: No Gods, No Masters, the collected writings of women freethinkers of the 19th and 20th centuries. It's been around a few years, and it is a classic. Run, do not walk, and get it. Go to the FFRF, give the website again, because you can, at the website, not only find out about the organization and its connections with feminism historically as well as currently, but you can also buy the book. I think you can get Fighting Words, my book, there too.
Oh, yes. And especially in election years, it remains a regular popular seller at the FFRF shop.
And the shop...
You can go to...
Go ahead.
FFRF.org/shop to get the books, or just go to our website at ffrf.org. You can donate and join at ffrf.org/resist if you want to use that route. And we do want to also wish everybody a very merry winter solstice, which is the real reason for the season, the shortest and darkest day of the year, that we are glad to share this holiday with believers, but we don't like this pretense that it's really about the birth of a Savior.
Right.
It's really about the rebirth of our Son every year and heralding the natural New Year.
That's right, and that's why all religions have something around this time of the year, all of them sort of sneakily stealing the idea from the actual physical science of what happens to the planet. I mean, it's the other thing I meant to say about the store, the shop, is that FFRF has a sense of humor. Oh, how great is that? So you can also order T-shirts and stickers with wonderful wonderful little sayings from the online store, like, 'tis the season for a reason, and just all sorts of really wonderful puns that turn solemn religiosity on its head. FFRF.org, and stick with this organization, because I think it's in the interest of people who are, in fact, religionist, and it certainly is in the interest of what the framers had in mind for this country, and of feminists. Thank you so much again, Annie Laurie.
Thank you, Robin Morgan. It was wonderful to talk to you, and we do think freedom depends on free thinkers and feminists.
Yes, it does. It is. It will.
We have to take another brief pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but I'll return in just a moment or so with some surprises in this special program.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back with a little surprise. You might call it the "A Rebellion a Day Keeps Depression Away" tonic. Now, as many of you know, tomorrow, December 19th, is when the Electoral College meets, and there have been petitions, email campaigns, even electors themselves who've called for a briefing about what the U.S. intelligence agencies really know about Russia's hacking into our electoral process and compromising it with the aim of electing Donald Trump. Other people are demanding a new election. Others are urging Obama to appoint Merrick Garland to an interim Supreme Court seat. All of these are fine and worth doing, although frankly I think that they're not just Hail Mary passes, but full rosaries. On the other hand, here are 5 things you can do that you know will make a difference. 1. If you want to let your congressional representatives and senators know you stand behind an investigation into Russia's involvement in our elections, here's an easy way to do it. Text the word investigate to 528-86. 528-86, the word investigate. You'll get a link from Pantsuit Action Network to fill in your information, and an email will automatically be generated to your personal state representative. And you press send and you're done. 10 seconds. And tell others about this. 528-86, the word investigate. 2. In the first 30 days after the election, there were more than 400 racist incidents in the United States, according to Time magazine. That was a month ago, and they're still mounting exponentially. There was a man in a Miami Starbucks screaming that he hadn't been served because of anti-white discrimination, and adding that he voted for Trump and all Muslims and black people were garbage. The cure for this? Keep your smartphone handy and its camera ready. Posting video evidence or stills can still make a big difference. 3. Read up on and check out organizations that will teach you about civil disobedience. You might need it, and being familiar with its tremendous power will help you yourself feel more confident. 4. There will be lots of legal challenges in 2017. Donate to Planned Parenthood, the NAACP, the National Lawyers Guild, and to keep the free press free, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and the Women's Media Center. 5. Targeted boycotts. There's even an app for that. The app is Boycott Trump, and it's made for all kinds of smartphones and easily downloaded for free from your app store. Sometimes this app lists too many targets too broadly, though, but you can focus always on anything with the name Trump on it. And don't forget Girlcots, too. That's rewarding a product who responds positively to boycott pressure, such as Kellogg having backed away from sponsoring Breitbart. There you go, 5 rebellious acts that make a difference. Please pass them along, too, because each of us must become an organizer, each of us a leader. And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Well, the Surrealism Corner, which has grown to the Surrealism Great Hall, or possibly the Surrealism Arena, has a number of items in it. This one is so touching. Let's hear it for scientists. Alarmed that decades of crucial climate measurements could vanish under the hostile Trump administration, scientists have started a feverish attempt to copy reams of government data onto independent servers in the hopes of safeguarding it from political interference. The efforts include a guerrilla archiving event in Toronto, where experts will copy irreplaceable public data, and meetings at the University of Pennsylvania focused on how to download as much federal data as possible in the coming weeks, and a collaboration of scientists and database experts who are compiling an online site to harbor scientific information. Trump has, of course, nominated a growing list of cabinet members who question the overwhelming scientific consensus around global warming. One of his advisors suggested that NASA be forbidden from conducting climate research. Then, remember Flynn facts? Flynn facts are the fake facts propagated by the person who will now be Trump's national security advisor, Mike Flynn. They were called Flynn facts because they were totally made up by him, and they were named as such by his aides when he was heading the Defense Intelligence Agency. He had been named to that, despite the fact that on 2 occasions he had been reprimanded by the military, of which he was a part, for disclosing classified information to foreign military leaders. He was finally forced out of his position heading the Defense Intelligence Agency in 2014, the grounds being his temperament and management style. He was authoritarian, he would not brook anyone disagreeing with him, and he kept propagating what his aides and subordinates called fake facts, or Flynn facts. This position, by the way, National Security Advisor, does not require Senate approval. So there won't be any hearings about him. Well, he returns to the Surrealism Corner, where he ought to be taking up permanent residence, because it now turns out the number of fake news propaganda stories that he posted on social media is now up to 16. This is during and after the campaign. And these are not the stories that his son also posted, which were even crazier and in greater volume. But these are the stories that he himself posted, which include the fake fact, the Flynn fact, that Hillary was involved with child sex trafficking. That was out of the pizzeria, you will recall, and that's why the guy went with a loaded shotgun into a pizzeria to shoot up the terrible folks working for Hillary, and shot up the place and was arrested. But not only was she involved with child sex trafficking, but she has a secretly waged war with the Catholic Church. And also he was Flynn who accused Obama of being a jihadi who laundered money for Muslim terrorists. This is now Mike Flynn, our national security advisor, with the closest distance to Trump's ear, and no Senate approval necessary. Then, looking at the rest of Trump's team, we now have the 4th member of the top Trumpians who has been accused of assaulting women. There's Trump himself, of course, who has standing accusations of at least 14 women. There's Corey Lewandowski, who you will remember roughed up a reporter and has been known to be verbally and physically abusive with women on staff. There's Steve Bannon, who, senior White House advisor, as named, also needing, by the way, no approval from the Senate, who has been charged with domestic violence against his now ex-wife back in 1996. The fourth member of the quartet, which is the nomination of Andy Puzder to lead the Labor Department. Well, Puzder is the owner of Carl's Jr.'s and Hardee's restaurants, which were, that chain that feminists for decades have targeted because of their profoundly demeaning to women sexist advertising. It turns out that Puzder's ex-wife, Lisa Henning, had accused him in a divorce filing of physically abusing her on 2 occasions. He had punched her when they were in a car together in 1985 and struck and choked her in their home in 1986. Police had been called. She, in fact, took out a protective order. He acknowledges that he doesn't know how she wound up on the floor. He says, I don't know if her foot caught or what happened, but she did go down on her back and stayed down on the ground. And he acknowledges that police responded to the altercation, although, of course, it wasn't him who hit or threw her or choked her and unplugged the phone after she tried to call police for help. Not him. And in getting the divorce, she withdrew the complaints. I do wish these women had not withdrawn their complaints out of the hope of getting alimony or whatever they got. But it would have helped if they'd stayed with the truth. Anyway, that's the fourth member now of the top Trump team. We could call them the sexual assault squad. Moving right along again, 54% of Americans have heard nothing at all about the so-called alt-right, the white nationalist and white supremacist and male supremacist movement. And 30% of people who have heard a lot or a little about it aren't sure where it stands or what it stands for. That's from the Pew Research Center. 54% have heard nothing at all. 30% have heard, but they don't know what it stands for. Well, I would say if it goose steps like a duck, and if it shouts like a duck, and if it acts like a duck, it's probably a neo-Nazi movement. And then last but not least, in the upside-down world we now inhabit, Rex Tillerson, as you know, who has no government or diplomatic experience and has really close ties to Vladimir Putin and has enriched himself by selling this incredibly environmentally destructive product called oil and shale, while lying about how destructive it is. Well, that guy is now named to be Secretary of State. And look who else is in there. It's a totally inverted world. Trump's choice for energy secretary wanted to abolish the Department of Energy. His education secretary is against public education, not to speak of the fact that her brother-in-law is Eric Prince of Blackwater, and she's married to the guy who owns Amway, who has been up for corruption and mistreatment of workers and other bad things. So she's a threat to public education. His Attorney General opposes the Voting Rights Act. His Housing Secretary opposes the Fair Housing Act. His Health and Human Services Secretary wants to restructure Medicare and abolish Obamacare or the ACA. His Treasury Secretary helped create the financial crisis and then profited from it, and his EPA, Environmental Protection Agency chief, is a climate change denier who has spent much of his career fighting and suing the agency he has now been appointed to lead. Now, if that's not surrealism, I don't know how we define reality. And now it's time for our little feature, We Told You So. An Alaska lawyer has accused Justice Clarence Thomas of groping her at a dinner party in 1999. She's a lawyer. Her name is Moira Smith, She was a 23-year-old Truman Foundation scholar at the time, and she told the National Law Journal that Thomas had, quote, sort of cupped his hand around my butt and pulled me close to him, close quote, as she was making final preparations for the party in a Washington suburb. Continuing to squeeze her buttocks, Thomas urged her to sit next to him at the dinner. She declined. He asked if she was sure, and I said yes, and that was finally the end of it. Through a court spokeswoman, Justice Thomas told the National Law Journal that the episode never happened, and that it must be politically motivated, such accusations. 3 of her former housemates and her ex-husband said that she had told them about the episode soon after it happened, according to the National Law Journal. And there you go. We told you so. He's been sitting on the bench of the Supreme Court now for 25 years. Anita told you so. One last quick break here. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live. And yes, I'll return in just a beat or two with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again to some fighting words. These are our fighting words, a few samples from the radical voices of the founding mothers of our country. It's inevitable that we start with Abigail Adams. Most people know the beginning of her famous quote, but they're unfamiliar with John Adams' response. Here are both, as she herself related in 1776, writing to her friend Mercy Otis Warren. Quote, Mr. Adams is very saucy to me in return for a list of female grievances which I transmitted to him. I think I will get you to join me in the petition to Congress. As I thought it was very probable our wise statesmen would erect a new government and form a new code of laws, I ventured to speak a word in behalf of our sex, who are rather hardly dealt with by the laws of England, which give such unlimited power to the husband to use his wife ill. I requested that our legislators would consider our case, and as all men of delicacy and sentiment are averse to exercising the power they possess, yet, as there is a natural propensity in human nature to domination, I thought the most generous plan was to put it out of the power of the arbitrary and tyrannical to injure us with impunity in establishing some laws in our favor upon just and liberal principles. I believe I even threatened fomenting a rebellion in case we were not considered, and assured him we would not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we had neither a voice nor representation. In return, he tells me he cannot but laugh at my extraordinary code of laws, that he had heard their struggle had loosened the bonds of government, that the children and apprentices were disobedient, that schools and colleges were grown turbulent, that Indians slighted their guardians, and Negroes grew insolent to their masters. But my letter was the first intimation to him that another tribe, more numerous and powerful than all the rest, had grown discontented. Close quote. And this from the Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions at the First Women's Rights Convention, Seneca Falls, New York, July 1848, itself based on the Declaration of Independence. These few excerpts. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of those who suffer from it to refuse allegiance to it, and to insist upon the institution of a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. The great Harriet Tubman, nicknamed Moses and made by Lincoln a Union general for her work as a nurse, a spy, a scout, and commander of troops during the Civil War, had escaped from slavery herself and, although disabled, forged the route that got named the Underground Railroad, and she rescued 756 enslaved people. She made 19 rescue trips from the South with a $40,000 award on her head. Among her pulse-quickening comments are these words from approximately 1869, quote, "There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other, for no man should take me alive. I should fight for my liberty as long as my strength lasted. When the time came for me to go, the Lord would let them take me." Elizabeth Oakes Smith, suffragist, speaking at the Syracuse National Convention of Women in 1852, said, "Do we fully understand that we aim at nothing less than an entire subversion of the present order of society, a dissolution of the whole existing social compact?" Lucy Stone, abolitionist and suffragist, in 1867 said, "The only name given by which the country can be saved is that of woman." And Victoria Woodhull, who was outrageous and who ran for President of the United States before any one of these women could vote, in 1871 flat out said, "We mean treason, we mean secession, and on 1,000 times grander scale than was that of the South. We are plotting revolution. We will overthrow this bogus republic and plant a government of righteousness in its stead." Belva A. Lockwood, attorney in 1878, said, "The only way for women to get their rights is to take them. If necessary, let there be a domestic insurrection." And Ida B. Wells, whose life spanned from 1862 to 1931, was a journalist, newspaper editor, suffragist, sociologist, feminist, and one of the founders of the NAACP in 1909, here is talking about the South, but in words that ring true today. Quote, "The country is brutalized to a degree not realized by its own inhabitants, and the very foundation of government, law, and order are imperiled." And because as a journalist she knew the value of a free press and fought for it, quote, "The people must know before they can act, and there is no educator to compare with the press." We often focus on militant words, on inspiring calls to action, and sometimes the triumphant exultations of those who fought this fight before us. But sometimes, like now, it's useful to dwell for a moment on how these great Americans handled other times, times of despair. So we'll give Susan B. Anthony the last word. Kathleen Barry, in her fine biography of Anthony, notes that in the spring of 1870, the newspaper that Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton had co-founded, called The Revolution, was going under. Anthony had sustained the paper for 29 months, mostly on subscription, but the paper and its editors were steeped in controversy and constantly were the subject of vociferous attack, so even women's rights supporters wouldn't invest or contribute to keep it going. Stanton took no salary. Anthony was paid only her expenses. They all made heavy sacrifices. Anthony was anguished at the situation. She wrote, "My paper shall not, must not go down." Her despair mounted. "I would say amen, but to live and fail, it would be too terrible to bear." Finally, on May 22, 1870, ownership of the Revolution passed from her hands, though she was left with the newspaper's $10,000 debt, by today's standards in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. She was determined to work off the debt lecture by lecture, $100 by $100, but it was so hard for her to see the paper fall below its standards. The new editors turned it into a literary and society journal, and she grieved, "It's like signing my own death warrant." Even the revolutionary motto, "Men their rights and nothing more, women their rights and nothing less," was changed by the new owners into, "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The new editors refused to have anything to do with the founders, the old radicals, and Anthony wrote that publishers and editors must be thrown overboard, so overboard we went. Still, listen to Susan B. Anthony in her despair. I am not complaining, for mine is the fate of almost every originator, pioneer who has ever opened up the way. I have the joy of knowing that I showed the thing possible, to publish a live, out-and-out woman's paper, taught other women to invest, to enter in and reap when I had sown. This is the woman whose last words in public were, "Failure is impossible." Those are our fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's it for today. As I said at the top of the show, this is our final episode for the year 2016. So we're saying goodbye, not so reluctantly, to that year. We will be on hiatus until January 15th, after which we will be back here and will warily, together with you, welcome in the new year. Warily. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the shows, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my own website and my blog at robinmorgan.net, and find me on Facebook and Twitter too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us on January 15th, right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.